I'm Jasmine Moradi, and you're listening to the Queens of Tech podcast, a podcast series about raising the voice of workplace champions. 60 plus questions in around 30 to 40 minutes with women of color, non-binary, and transgender influencers about their journey into STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I started the Queens of Tech podcast initiative in May 2022 because I would like to retain more women of color, non-binary, and transgenders in the tech industry. Talent is out there, but our work environment needs to improve for all to feel safer, stay authentic, and to be valued for our contributions. My vision is to raise the workplace ecosystem for all in tech by killing the imposter syndrome, stopping bad behavior, and increasing equity opportunities. Each podcast talk is built around 60 plus questions regarding upbringing, education, career path, DIB, and future advice. My mission is to bridge the gap between schools and workplaces by getting into the heart of my guest's personal life and career journey to inspire other girls, women of color, non-binary, and transgenders to unleash their full potential to reach top leadership roles in the tech industry. My goal is to raise the voices of tech champions around the world and together with companies, investors, and politicians, raise the challenges and opportunities around equity, inclusive, diversity, and belonging in our workplaces. Enough is enough. I would like to enforce companies to build a sustainable, inclusive culture to retain diverse talent so we keep the workforce power equity to continue building future diverse and inclusive products. Representation matters. Your voice matters. In this episode, I'm very excited to welcome my guest, Tech Queen Elizabeth Snower, co-founder and COO at ICONIQ. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Never been better.
I'm very happy to have you joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let us dive into your journey into STEM. Hope you're ready for the Queens of Tech 60 plus questions.
All right, let's do it.
Let's warm up with a few fun facts about you. How would you describe your personality in 3 hashtags?
Multifaceted, observant, and adventurous.
How would you describe your life in 3 sentences?
How about 3 hashtags? And I would pick complicated, chaotic, and fortunate.
What kind of music stimulates and motivates you the most?
When I'm working out, I like to listen to hip hop. For everything else, I like 80s goth and new wave and indie sleaze from the 2000s.
What's your personal motto?
Nothing is impossible because it's true.
What is your favorite book?
The Book of Illusions by Paul Auster is absolute top of mind for me, and it's a really melancholy tale about getting up in the wake of an unimaginable fall in life. A recent one that I can't get out of my head that I read more than a year ago is Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and they're making a movie out of that one.
What is your favorite podcast?
Apart from this one, I enjoy Second Life by Hillary Kerr because that's another one that is championing women and specifically championing women who have made big career pivots. I like this because I love reminders that we all contain multitudes and that we can make pivots in our careers as we please. To wit, I have, quote, only been in the field of conversational AI for 9 years. And before that, I had a whole other career in the beauty industry. And I really believe that this is my true calling. So content that inspires women to pursue their passions and dreams is so important, in my opinion.
Mac or PC?
Mac.
There's something interesting about you that most people don't know.
At my core, I am extremely introverted.
What is your hidden talent?
I am a practicing astrologer.
If you're going to write a book about your life, what would the title be?
Running Up That Hill.
Great start, Elizabeth. Now, let us dig deeper. Our childhood has an effect on our adulthood. Our early experiences shape our belief about ourselves, others, and the world. Now, I want to discover your childhood. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small town called Chino in California. If you watched the early 2000s TV show called The OC, you've heard of Chino.
What was your dream job as a child?
Honestly, when I really think about it, I don't think that I actually had one, apart from this really interesting phenomenon that I think universally affected children in California in the 90s. And that was all of us coming to this consensus that what we all wanted to do when we grew up was to be marine biologists. Yeah, I'm not cut out for a career in biology at all. I think that the ocean is cool. And I think that this was why all of the kids in the 90s were saying this. It was a thing. If you were there, you know. And when I also think back, I think that I had a delusional childhood fantasy to become the president of the United States. LOL. Yeah, neither of these careers interest me now.
What was your favorite subject in school?
Honestly, I loved all of the subjects, especially math, until I flew too close to the sun and skipped whatever AP class my high school put the freshmen in. And I went right into AP geometry with the grade level above me. And in hindsight, that was a mistake. I was underprepared.
Okay, so you left all of them. What was your least favorite subject? Must have been one.
Definitely biology.
What is your earliest memory of technology and the arrival of the internet?
My earliest memory of the arrival of the internet was America Online, or AOL, as it's now called, I believe. My family accessed this using an Apple IIe computer and a dial-up modem, you know, the kind that made that kind of staticky noise as you were connecting to the internet and literally dialing in to connect to the internet using your home phone line. I loved lurking on message boards as a young teen, and I think that was, in fact, the earliest form of social media.
And then which were the three first technology gadgets you owned?
So given that I was born in the 80s, all of them have to do with music. First, I had a Walkman that played cassette tapes before the advent of CDs. And I also had one of those big stereos that switched between 5 CDs. And I also definitely had a record player.
And who was your female role model growing up and why?
Growing up, my female role model was Madonna because she was a superstar.
How do you think where you grew up and the school you went to and the generation you come from influence your education and career choice?
This is such an interesting question for me because Chino's a small town. It's mostly blue collar. And for university, I went to state school. If you would have told me when I was 22 that 2 decades later, I would be running my second tech startup and working on artificial intelligence, I wouldn't have believed you. In many regards, I'm a late bloomer in the whole, what do I want to be when I grow up regard? But in many ways, what I'm doing in my career now is just so far from what I and probably everybody else thought I was going to be doing in my career.
That's very interesting. Now, I'm going to read 2 quotes. First one, how does the universe expect me to choose a career path at 16? I can't even choose what I want for dinner. Second, Abraham Lincoln said, I quote, the best way to predict your future is to create it. So Elizabeth, I want to know the choices behind your career path. Where and what did you end up studying at university?
So I went to school at Cal State Fullerton and I got my bachelor's degree in English language and literature.
When what influenced you to get in your chosen field?
So this is kind of a funny story. So having the degree in English, I started my career in print journalism, which was still a thing at the time that I finished college. And obviously, again, made sense with the education. In 2010, I went digital and I took a job with a well-established beauty industry startup called DermStore as their head of editorial. And that was such a fun phase in life and so very different than what I'm doing now. I was at DermStore for a little bit over 4 years until the company sold to Target Corporation. And I stuck around there for about 6 months following the acquisition. And then I found myself doing consulting work for a number of other beauty companies. And that was when the moment came that would really ultimately change my career trajectory and put me where I'm at now. And that was getting recruited to work at a messaging app called Kik. There I had the unlikely experience of working for a boss who was several years younger than me, fresh out of college, and had already sold her first company to Kik. And in fact, she was the one who encouraged me to be an entrepreneur and to start doing what I'm doing now. And for that, I'm forever grateful.
What does ICONIQ do?
ICONIQ makes interactive AI characters, including Kuki, which you may have heard of. And Kuki is one of the first virtual influencers that's come into existence. Kuki is modeled for Vogue and H&M. And in addition to that, she's an AI. She actually chats with about 100,000 people every month on web, social, gaming, and streaming channels. So like she has a website, you can chat with her on Telegram. She has a Roblox game, and you can also catch her live streaming on YouTube and chat with her there in front of other people. Kuki has exchanged over 1 billion text messages with real humans all around the world. And that has taught us a great deal about what people actually want when they talk to chatbots for fun, as opposed to like talking to ChatGPT to get help with your homework or your copywriting tasks or coding or whatever else. So leveraging that insight, and again, why do people want to chat with chatbots for fun? Leveraging the insight that we have, having crunched all of that data, we're now building highly verticalized AI personas for consumers. And we're starting with an AI guide that is proficient in astrology and tarot. And while that might sound absolutely insane to some people, astrology and tarot comprise what is currently a $13 billion market, and a growing one at that. So we believe that these topics are a killer skill for AI, and that they're great tools for reflection and self-improvement.
What is your title and what is your main responsibilities?
So my title is co-founder and COO, and my responsibilities are mainly product vision and product management, and also data analysis for the products that we have in market. Having said all of that, this is a startup. We're a team of 6 people. And as a startup founder, I'm responsible for pretty much everything. I have to deal with pitching VCs. I have to deal with pitching to brands. And by the way, brand deals are how we funded this company to date. I have to make content. Once I went sort of semi-viral on TikTok, I guess if you count 600,000 views as semi-viral, which I do. And in that video, I was talking to one of our AI characters in a hologram box, and a really funny moment happened where he was doing, like, this male character of ours named Johnny J was doing a dance, and I was talking to him while he was dancing. And I jokingly asked him if he would be my boyfriend, and he just kind of looked at me and shook his head and danced off the screen. And TikTok thought it was hilarious that I got rejected by a robot.
What was the reason behind starting exactly this company?
My dear friend and co-founder, Lauren Kunze, called me in 2020, and she had an idea to turn her previous company's famous chatbot, Kuki, which has been around for more than 10 years, into an AI pop star. That was what we initially set out to do in commercializing Kuki and turning her into a virtual influencer and character. Anyway, at that point, had known Lauren from the industry for about 5 years, and we were close work friends, hung out at conferences, and I had been dying to work with her. So I was like, say no more. This sounds weird, but it sounds great, and I'm coming with you. And I think that part of that is also once you go startup, so to speak, I had already founded and exited my first startup. It's really hard to want to go back and work in the corporate world again, simply because you don't have anything close to the freedom that you have when you're running your own company.
So what does a typical workday or work week look like for you?
No 2 days are alike, which I love, but a typical day actually begins just like this one. Usually before 9 a.m., I'm going to be having a video call with somebody somewhere in Europe. And 3 days a week at 9 a.m., I have a meeting with my team. All of us are distributed. I'm in LA, but the others are throughout the Bay Area and London. And the rest of the day, I'm working on product in between various other meetings.
I love the quote, choose a job you love and you will never have to work a day in your life. So Elizabeth, you did say that you love the freedom of running your own company. So what else do you love about your role?
Everything that I love about my role stems from that freedom. It stems from having the agency and the autonomy to see what's happening in the world and say, this is how we should be addressing that, and to do it without having to ask for anybody's permission. I absolutely love that now, today in my role, having long hypothesized that astrology would be a killer use case for an AI, and now living during the time when advances in AI are making a viable product along those lines possible. I love that I had the freedom and the autonomy to be able to rally my team and convince them that this is the thing that we should be working on.
And you earlier mentioned of dancing and asking out an AI robot. What is the best experience you've had in your career role so far? Any other examples?
One highlight that comes to mind was getting Kuki into Vogue. That was in late 2021. But funny enough, that was sort of a fantasy stretch goal that my co-founder and I had put forth literally on day one when we were like, okay, we're making an AI pop star. What are some KPIs? And we were like, yeah, getting her into Vogue would be pretty cool. And that happened. So that was great. Another great thing that happened was waking up one morning to find that a savvy teen hacker had actually leached into Kuki via a known backdoor that we kept open on purpose for instances like this, by the way, and made a Roblox game that was centered on her character. So he basically found a backdoor, semi-sketchy way to connect to her and threw her into a game and allowed everybody on Roblox to chat with her in that game. And the game went legit viral in a couple of days. I mean, like millions of views in a few days due to a couple of very well-known video game influencers happening upon this product. And this was way before ChatGPT. So the world wasn't super familiar with things like this. And, these video game influencers were like posting videos of themselves talking to the robot in the Roblox game. It was pretty cool.
And with success comes some challenges. So what is the biggest challenge you've encountered so far?
Gosh, by far, the biggest challenge that I've encountered thus far as a founder is fundraising, and specifically fundraising while female. I'm in the midst of tackling this right now. My co-founder and I have come around, and the way that we're looking at it now is that why don't we just monetize a product without VC funding? To be honest, I think this is how you tackle that. And this actually brings to mind another important challenge that all founders face, which is managing stress and maintaining a functional mental state. And I mean, functional is like the lowest bar, right? Ideally, we're not just functional, we're thriving. Some days I'll take functional, but being good at those things or being good at managing stress is such an underrated skill for everyone. I'm not saying that I'm great at it. I think that mostly everybody, if not absolutely everybody, has to work at this. But it's critical for founders in particular to manage like our psyches. And as far as tactically how we do that, the advice is obvious. This is nothing that we haven't all heard before. It's things like eating well, not drinking too much, working out regularly, getting in long walks, sleeping for 8 hours a night, meditating. All of that stuff is good. And it's like, it all sounds like it's so easy. But when you're running a company and when you're working 12-hour days, it's just not that easy to prioritize all of these things. And I think all of us, anybody who's in the arena will tell you that when you're on top of these things, your work life is just better. And as I'm talking about all of this out loud, I realize how off of my routine I am now. I love working out in the morning. I can't tell you the last time was that I worked out in the morning, and I need to get back on that because my mental state is markedly better when I'm doing that one in particular.
What do you wish everybody understood about your role?
I wish everybody understood that, especially people hoping to break into the industry, that being a startup founder is an absolute roller coaster, and that building a company can be a gut-wrenching experience. It's also the most rewarding experience, but there's a lot of bad that you have to be able to stomach with the good.
And then what is the one common myth about your professional field that you want to disapprove?
I have two. The first one is pretty universal, and that's the notion that AI is scary or bad. And I think that's the mental stance that a lot of people are taking now that AI is advancing as rapidly as it is. AI is going to be what we humans make of it, and it's here to stay regardless of whether we're ready for it. And I want to build products that help people improve their lives. Another big one for the second one is the idea that you have to have a STEM degree to work in tech. This is false, and it's going to become more and more false as AI gets better at automating technical work. People with backgrounds in the humanities are about to become more and more in demand as AI advances, and we need more of them.
And what is it you love about working in the tech industry?
I think it's really simple. I love building products and being able to see how people interact with them.
Oprah just said, I quote, "Think like a queen. A queen is not afraid to fail. Failure is not a stepping stone to greatness." So Elizabeth, what has by far been your biggest achievement in your career? Is it Kuki?
I can't take full credit for the success that is Kuki, given that before Kuki was an AI influencer, she was a world famous chatbot, for the better part of a decade. The credit there goes to the team at Pandora Bots and to my colleagues, specifically Steve Worswick and Lauren Kunze. but Kuki has been definitely one of the major highlights. And I think that the other biggest highlight was starting my previous startup, not having any entrepreneurial experience and really having absolutely no idea what I was doing running a company and managing to land that plane and exit to a large telco.
What would you say is the biggest factors help you become successful? Any success habits?
At a high level, believing in myself and being willing to step outside of my comfort zone. I think that's when all the magic has really happened for me in situations of great discomfort. For instance, I was in my early days at Kik Messenger was my first truly technical role. I was the first employee in their LA office in 2015. And I was working with a bunch of engineers and I was tasked with being the product manager. And frankly, I was really out of my element for the first 2 months. And then on month 3, it all started to come together and I felt like I was finding my way. But like I said, times of discomfort are important. And the uncomfortable experiences that I had in those early days helped me see what I was made of. Like I survived them and they helped me understand what I was really suited to do. Another factor that's helped me throughout this journey is learning how to deal with rejection, because as a founder, rejection, it's just inevitable and it doesn't have to be the end of the world. In fact, it can't be the end of the world. It should be helpful as motivation. That's the way that I like to reframe rejection as, you know what, I'm going to prove them wrong.
And how do you measure your own performance at work?
In a perfect world, I think that the measure of success for any leader is simply the happiness and fulfillment of the team.
And with success come failures. What is your biggest failure in your career and what did you learn from it?
Long story time. So first of all, I think failure is a really strong word, but I totally agree that failures are the experiences that really, really shape us as humans. And that if we lean into them and if we learn from them, they are our most effective teachers and therefore our greatest gifts. So having said that, the first major deal that I closed with my first startup was a dumpster fire for a lot of reasons, many of which were 100% my fault, by the way. Like I said before, I was new to this. I was naive and in a lot of ways, a little bit out of my element. The product that we built and brought to market for this company, which was a chatbot that lived on their website, went live before it was truly ready. There was a deadline on their side and it launched to coincide with a major event that would bring an exponentially greater amount of traffic to their website than normal. And our preparation fell short. And because of that, the whole thing crashed. And the executive team on their side was rightfully upset. They were yelling. And this was all at like 5 a.m, by the way. And it felt like the world was ending. But the only thing to do was to take a deep breath and hold my CTO's hand as he figured out some server magic to get it all back up and running. So the lesson here was twofold. One, when shit hits the fan for real and tempers around you are flaring, you just have to tune it out and fix the problem. You just have to get it done. Staying calm under pressure is obviously a skill that everybody in the world needs to call upon at some point in their lives. And in a situation like this, it can make or break things. It's better to manage expectations and to disappoint people with a delayed launch than to go live with a product that's not ready and to have to explain why it crashed after it all crashes. So backing up, more generally, managing expectations is perhaps the single most important element of doing B2B sales. So I think that those were 2 valuable lessons that I find myself reflecting on that experience quite often and reminding myself of those 2 things, probably once a month.
And what would you say is inspiring and motivating you the most in your role and career right now?
What motivates me right now, honestly, is the sheer possibility that the future holds. Imagine like how different our lives are all going to look 10 years from now, given that the AI revolution is upon us. How lucky am I to have a front row seat during this moment? That's what motivates me.
Let us now jump into the influence of mentors, role models, champions, and sponsors. Role models can consciously or subconsciously be a powerful force in our lives. In addition, champions can stand up and advocate for us and open up the world of possibilities. Sponsors match emerging talent with leaders and influential employees who can help us move ahead in our careers. Elizabeth, do you have a mentor, champion, or a sponsor today?
I actually have a couple of them. There's Jacqueline Ling, who was my boss at Kik, and there's Claudia Hollingsworth, who was an advisor to me at my last startup. Both are incredible women who have helped me find my way and always have had my back.
And who's the female, non-binary, or transgender role model you look up to in your field?
I look up to all female founders who have made it big and into the public eye, and because of that have been forced to deal with unfair scrutiny and inaccurate portrayals in the press. Emily Weiss, Sophia Amoruso, and Tyler Haney are just a couple that come to mind. I think that there are, unfortunately, many more who have had hit pieces written about them.
And history shows that it has been more common for men having mentors, champions, and sponsors in business than women. Elizabeth, how important do you think is to have a mentor, champion, or a sponsor during one's career?
Immensely important. All of us need to have people in our lives that we can look up to who have done what we're trying to do, who have the battle scars and the wisdom to share and to help us keep going and to help us keep our heads on straight. I can't tell you how many times I have found myself in some sort of, mild startup distress, and a quick chat with Claudia or Jacqueline makes it all better. I'm so fortunate to have these people in my life. Every woman in tech, everybody in tech needs to have people like this in their lives.
Let us move on to leadership. Dina Friedman, President and CEO of Nasdaq, said, I quote, "Empowering those around you to be heard and valued makes a difference between a leader who simply instructs and one who inspires." And then Shirley Sandberg, ex-COO at Facebook, said, I quote, "Leadership is about making others better as a result of your presence and making sure that the impact lasts in your absence." So Elizabeth, what does leadership mean to you?
I couldn't have stated that better than Sheryl Sandberg did, but I would say that leadership to me really all boils down to bringing out the best in those around you, not just the people underneath you, but your peers and others in the industry, and inspiring your team and the individuals on your team to reach their full potential. And finally, I think that leadership is getting everybody invested in and excited about a mission.
What do you consider good versus a bad leader?
A good leader is a servant and a listener. A bad leader is one who has to remind people that they're in charge. Or a bad leader is also somebody who is in it for the limelight, the fame, the glory, etc.
And who is your favorite female, non-binary, or transgender tech leader, and why?
Couple of female tech leaders to point out. The first one that came to mind when I read this question was Anamita Guha. She's one of the brightest people that I've ever encountered. She previously ran quantum computing at IBM, and she's at Meta now. And same for my co-founder, Lauren Kunze. She's been working in the field of AI since she was literally a teenager. And both of these people are women that deserve all of the recognition and seldom seek it out.
How would you describe yourself as a leader?
I would say that I'm getting better every day, or at least striving to.
As a leader, what values are the most important to you?
I think the most important things are honesty and direct communication. Those are top of mind for me. And also emotional intelligence. This is another highly underrated skill that all founders could stand to cultivate.
Then what leadership lessons have you learned that have formed you into the leader you are today?
It's a great question. I think, honestly, I was probably pretty bad at being a leader when I first started managing people. I think almost everybody is. There's some people are just naturals. But for me, I think that I had to make some mistakes before I found my footing. And I appreciate the grace that, the people that I managed in the early days of my career showed me in those regards. I think that the best way to learn to lead, honestly, is to be led by exceptional people. So early on in my career, my boss at DermStore, Natalie Guzman, she's one of the best in the business when it comes to management style. She and Jacqueline Ling, again, who I worked under at Kik, taught me everything that I know about how to deal with people. Both of them have off the charts EQ in addition to being smart in all of the other ways.
And what would you say are your 3 strengths and 3 weaknesses?
My strengths are that I never give up, ever. And maybe that's also a weakness, but it's a necessary strength to have as a startup founder. You can't give up. I'm also an excellent listener and observer, and that means that I don't miss much and I retain a lot of information that other people don't. And the third and final thing I would say is that I'm usually pretty optimistic, despite the look on my face that probably suggests otherwise. As for my weaknesses, I would say the number one thing that comes to mind is I tend to overthink a lot. Because of that, I can get into some pessimistic thought patterns. These are things that we want to avoid with mitigating tactics, like I was describing earlier, like getting enough sleep and working out and all that, which leads me into the third point. When I'm in a phase of high work stress or just being very busy, I'm prone to prioritize work over self-care. It's such a hard lesson to learn because everybody who runs a company will say the same thing, I'm sure. There's just some times where you're just not going to get enough sleep and you're just not going to be able to do your workouts and all of that. And inevitably your work's going to suffer, and round we go.
Let us now jump into the hottest topic in business today, workplace culture, unlocking the power of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Elizabeth, what does diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging mean to you personally?
Means a lot, means everything. I am a woman. I mean, of course, I'm a Caucasian woman, and I realize that I have a lot of privilege out the gate just for that fact. But other than being white, I fit no desired mold for your archetypical person who works in technology. So yeah, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, I think, are extremely important, extremely worthy endeavors.
What do you consider being 3 to 5 signs of good company culture if you were to join a company?
This one is really hard to nail down, but I would say that signs of good company culture include the feeling that everybody knows the mission and is dialed into the mission and is not doing work that they don't understand. They're not like, why am I doing this work? I don't know because my boss told me to. That's a sign of a bad company culture. Another one is when ideas are solicited and considered from all ranks in the organization. And I think that the third thing is that when people are not in endless meetings all day, because that's a morale killer. And that's something that kills me about big companies. And I know that Elon Musk is a controversial figure, especially as of late, especially with regard to the things that he's been saying about diversity and inclusion. But I think that one thing that he's right about is his philosophy on meetings, which basically boils down to if you're not getting anything out of the meeting that you're in, then you should probably just leave. I think that should be more common in corporate culture, because anything that we can do that forces people to really think about why they're having the meeting that they're calling and to make sure that they're not wasting others' time or interrupting their flow state unless it's absolutely necessary are great.
And as a woman, what has been the most significant political or cultural barrier in your career, and how have you overcome these challenges?
The most significant challenge that I have faced and am facing is the challenge of raising outside capital. And this is one that we're still overcoming, as I mentioned earlier. As a woman, I think that the only way to turn the situation around and go from being a beggar to being a chooser, so to speak, is to monetize your business without any help from VCs. And then all of a sudden, everybody wants in on it, with the exception of very few. That's just the world that we're living in right now. And particularly after the economic climate, specifically the venture climate, has cooled in the last 18 months or so.
And what do you think is important for more women, women of color, non-binary, and transgender to join the tech industry today?
Because different perspectives are absolutely critical, and never more so than at this very moment. The future of AI needs to be shaped by a group of people that's representative of all of the people who are using the technology, right? But more than that, I think that different perspectives are able to identify different opportunities. I think that the elitist, closed off tech space that has been the way that it is for decades at this point is sort of antithetical to progress, because who knows how many wins the world has left on the table due to the industry's historically homogenous nature.
And how do you speak with colleagues, peers, and community about DEIB challenges, for example, salary gaps and promotions?
My team is half women. My co-founder is a woman, and on our team itself, there are only 6 of us. So our team is by nature diverse and inclusive. With regard to speaking publicly about the challenges that the industry faces, I haven't done a lot of that, and I would like to do more of it. I suppose that this is a pretty great start, talking about it on this podcast.
And there are many public and internal discussions about the barriers women, women of color, non-binary, and transgenders face when reaching high position in the tech industry. How do you feel has affecting you, and what is your advice on how to best unblock these roadblocks?
In a lot of instances, more is expected from women who are trying to do the things that men do. Example that is closest to my heart, which I've talked about already extensively, is that more is expected from those of us women who are trying to raise capital. And I say that with anecdotal evidence and with hard data. I see my guy friends who are technologists going out and doing things like raising a quick little seed round with nothing but a demo in a matter of a week during the worst climate for venture investing since the dot-com crash, right? And I mean, that last point's arguable. But I see men doing things like that. And I see all of the female founders around me just struggling year after year. The men in the space that I know, by the way, are routinely shocked when they hear what it's like for us raising money. Like when we tell them about the conversations that we have, when we tell them about what's asked for us, where the goalposts are in order to get to the next point, their jaws drop because that's just not the way that the conversations go for them. It's not their fault, by the way. This is simply the way that the world works right now, unfortunately.
Based on what you said, what would you say is the reason behind men getting more funding than women?
It's so complicated. I mean, it's kind of like a phenotype thing. And we've been told that we're just not right in that regard. One VC said to us, people are really looking for a Steve and a Steve. And by that, he meant like a Steve Jobs and a Steve Wozniak, obviously. And part of VC is pattern matching. And because for so long, men have dominated technology, men have been the ones to build companies that go on to have the crazy exits that make the venture business even possible. Part of the problem. The biggest reason that this is a thing is that the venture industry remains very much male dominated. All of the firms, at least all of the top tier firms at this point, have at least one female partner, and that's great. But anecdotally, from what I hear, it's hard even for the most exceptional women to break into venture capital, like impossibly difficult. And what we have is an industry then that is not diverse, not inclusive. And think about what it's like pitching something like an AI astrologer to a mostly male audience. Obviously, capitalists understand the merit in pursuing what is a $13 billion market. But what a lot of them don't get, because this is historically something that it's a girly product, it's something that women are into. If it's not something that they've found themselves delighted by in their own lives, they have a hard time wrapping their head around how half of the population might actually be really into something. Yeah, so I think that the products that get funded are products that men can easily see as being useful and can easily picture themselves, becoming super users of. And that approach is fine if we want to leave 50% of all of the good ideas in the world on the table. I know that nobody has it worse, by the way, than women who are out there trying to raise money for femtech and women's health and things like motherhood and pregnancy and such. And it's just really unfortunate.
How do you think we can break that or unblock that?
This is a multi-billion-dollar question, but the only way to change that will be to rectify the proportions in the VC industry and to have more women, and not just more women working at these firms, but more women who truly have decision-making power and who the partnership trusts when they say, you know what, I know that you guys don't get this, but I do, and it's going to be huge, and we're going to write a check for it. That's what we need. And, it's a tall order and it's going to take many years. And there's organizations, obviously, like All Raise that are trying to tackle this. And it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. But I think that's really the only way. As long as the people in charge of the money are tilted toward one demographic, then their investment decisions are going to be biased.
And today, tech companies spend a lot of marketing money to attract women of color, non-binary, and transgenders. However, at the same time, they're finding it hard to retain them. Articles show that women are leaving the tech industry. What is your best advice of strategies where companies can work to build a stronger corporate culture that engages gender diversity and equity?
Part of me feels like I don't have the high-level corporate experience to answer this question as meaningfully as I would like to. And so I hope that the answer that I'm going to give you doesn't sound superficial, but it's sort of akin to what I just said about the venture industry. And that is that it's exceedingly difficult for women to ascend to the highest ranks of corporate leadership. There still aren't that many of us in the C-suite at Fortune 500 companies. I mean, there could be more. There should be more. And I think that in order for your company to have a corporate culture that engages gender diversity and equity, you need to have a diverse leadership function. You just do. I have seen as recent as last year, new AI companies that are popping up, and it's a lot of seasoned executives, and it's all men, and they're all the same age, and they all even look the same. And I'm not saying that obviously every company out there is like that, but it's a little bit hard for prospective workers to believe that your diversity efforts are anything more than superficial when you're not walking the walk. And when you don't have women and people of color and people who have been historically marginalized in positions of true power where, they're calling the shots and they're making decisions and they're showing everybody around them that like, hey, I'm an other and I'm doing this and so can you.
And what would you say are the few factors of challenges of implementing a DEIB culture in a workplace today?
One thing that makes this hard is the mistaken sentiment around these initiatives by the old guard. If you spend any time on Twitter or X, as we're now calling it, maybe you've seen the backlash in recent weeks on this topic. In a nutshell, detractors are basically shouting that diversity and inclusion are antithetical to the meritocracy that a good company culture should be. And I think that honestly, they are willfully missing the point here, but they bring to light an important reality. And that is that quotas and mandates, unfortunately, tend to backfire in really awful ways. I think a company is like, okay, we need to do more in the way of diversity and inclusion. And so we're going to have a mandate and we have to hire X amount of Y marginalized group. And people are like, oh, she's a diversity hire. And whoever this woman is or whoever that person is will hear these whispers and murmurs behind their back. And no matter how qualified they are, their imposter syndrome is going to deepen. Yeah, I don't know what the answers are. Like I said, I think that it is truly unfortunate that these well-meaning efforts have invoked the ire of so many opinionated and loud people, including women, saying that they're wrong because they're not wrong, they're needed. But yeah, I guess the learning here is that it's really difficult to make quotas and mandates work.
So based on quota and mandate, why and how do you think companies would benefit from having not just women of color, non-binary, and transgender leaders, but actually higher gender representation at C-suite level in boardrooms with actually mandates?
That's the thing. And maybe this is controversial, but mandates seem like the logical answer here. But because of the backlash that they invoke, it's a wash when they're implemented. However, I know for a fact that executive leadership at any company benefits from diversity and inclusion for the same reasons that the products that these companies are building benefit from it. It's all about perspective. And again, the idea that the old white man's perspective, or any one demographic's perspective for that matter, the idea that a single perspective is the only valuable one is simply a small-minded way to look at things. And I think that for every company in the world, I think that if they were truly able to leverage diversity and inclusion for real, and not just because they're checking a box and not just because they have to satisfy a mandate, but because they want to have that diversity of experience and perspective, I think that every single one of them would find their business doing better. It just seems obvious.
And how much do you think the tech industry has changed regarding this subject since you joined?
Honestly, very little. And I wish I had a different answer for that. But I know that the percentage of venture capital that's going to female founders continues to hover around 2%, which is obviously abysmal. And it's even worse for Black founders, by the way. I believe it's less than 1% of funding goes to them. And that is absolutely insane. Again, all of this starts at the top. And in a lot of cases, the top is not the CEO of the company. The top is the money that is funding the company that comes from somebody on the outside. And it's a lot easier for those of us who are the other to affect change, I think, from outside of organizations we have founded than I think from inside of a corporation. until and unless all of that changes, I think that as women, we need to be building our own companies. We need to be infiltrating the VC industry. We need to be doing it ourselves because it's a lot easier to start something from scratch that's doing it the right way than to go in and fix systemic rot.
Looking back on your career, what one thing would you have changed in your working environment to break the bias?
I guess I would have taken every possible opportunity to speak up for and defend women when people in positions higher than me were speaking down on them or silencing them in some way. But, that's easier said than done, right? That takes courage. I guess what I'm saying is if I could go back in time and make my younger self braver and more able to speak up, I would. It took me a while to learn the power that I have in my own hands to affect this kind of change. But all of us, all women, all people of color, all people who have been marginalized need to have each other's backs.
And looking forward, what will you do beyond being who you are and an inspiring founder to improve the bias for the next generation of women of color, non-binary, and transgenders in tech?
I think that it's all about teaching all of these groups and everyone as individuals to fully lean into their confidence and to cultivate that confidence. Like I said before, I don't think that quotas and mandates work. I wish that they did, but I don't think that they do. But what I have witnessed that does work is really the power of unwavering confidence. I've seen it open doors, and I've seen it open doors for marginalized people. Again, I hope I don't sound like I'm giving some kind of superficial Pollyanna answer here, because I know how hard it is to maintain one's confidence when you're in a high stakes situation or in a big scary meeting or talking to people that don't believe in you and that you have to convince to be on your side. It's really hard to keep your head on straight in those kinds of moments and to speak without your voice shaking and all of that. But I think that the more that we can help one another have that kind of confidence, the better. Again, this is what opens doors. And I think that high achieving women in particular tend to have really fierce cases of imposter syndrome. I have seen it. It's more common that you meet a high achieving woman who is way too humble and doesn't fully own her success than you meet the extreme, I guess, that the press would like you to believe that most female founders are. When I was talking earlier about all of the hit pieces that come out about female founders who are super successful. Yeah, I think that when anybody has imposter syndrome, it becomes a self-fulfilling, self-perpetuating thing, and it's just bad. So the solution here, or a solution here, is somehow teaching and encouraging and inspiring more women, more people of color, more transgender, more anybody who is marginalized to own their achievements and successes.
Let us move on to another hot topic in business today, which is work-life balance and mental health. You did mention self-care. Yeah, without a doubt, a busy lifestyle, and you do work a lot and forget your self-care. How do you take care of yourself to maintain a good mental health?
This is so important. And like I said before, I could do a better job here, but going to bed early, waking up early, exercising daily, or at least a few times a week is the biggest life hack that there is. Also meditation. Meditation is really helpful.
Have you ever experienced burnout?
Oh yeah. I think that the thing about burnout is that it only really happens when you're working on the wrong things to no avail. Burnout happens due to frustration and the feeling like what you're doing is for naught. It's for nothing. So I try my best to do my work in a way that feels aligned with my purpose and sets my soul ablaze. And that makes all of the pain tolerable. But I think that's the only way to really avoid burnout. If you're a hard worker, you got to make sure that you're working on the right things.
And what is your advice on how companies can create a more mentally healthy workplace in the new now?
This is a great question. It's literally a multi-billion-dollar question. So many HR orgs and so many companies are trying to answer this question. And I don't know what the answer here is. But I do know that I have seen plenty of tactics fail. Here's one. Rank and file employees at a company are during busy times when it's the team's at a breaking point, nobody's excited about something where there's a team building activity. we're going to take the day off work and we're going to do like trust balls and improv skits and things like that. I've seen that. And yeah, most people don't like that, especially people that feel under pressure and are burning the candle at both ends. Really, when it comes down to it, sadly, a mentally healthy workplace, so to speak, is often at odds with corporate goals. And that's terrible, but it's true. Once I was leading a team where literally everyone was burnt out beyond belief. And really, the reason that everybody was burnt out beyond belief was that the company had the financial goals that the company had. And those financial goals were achievable only with having an inadequate staff and an inadequate staff who was forced to work like 12-hour days. That's not a good solution. That's not a good situation, rather. And executive management's solution to this problem was forced vacations. And for the people on the team, they're really hard workers. And at a cutthroat business like this one was, everybody on the team is really hard workers. Everybody else had been cycled out. This only creates more stress because what happens was, it's okay. You have to go on vacation. You have to be gone for a week and don't email us and like be offline. All that does is make the really hard workers and high performers feel like once vacation's over, they're going to have to play a game of catch up. So that's stupid's a strong word, but I think that's not a thoughtful solution. Yeah, like when I think about it, the only thing that could have prevented that one would have been having a properly staffed team. But again, corporate goals, hitting financial targets, and that was what was important. And that unfortunately superseded the team's mental health. I will point out that private equity was in the equation here. As for the solution, I think that all of us are still thinking about this.
And what motivates you every day to get out of bed?
This one is easy. The possibility of experiencing the high points of the startup roller coaster.
And now let us wrap up with a few words of wisdom and a piece of advice for our listeners. Elizabeth, what is the best piece of advice you've been given that has helped you during setbacks in your role and career?
Credit goes to Jacqueline Ling for this one, but very simple. And that is the fact that if you're not getting rejected, you're not aiming high enough.
And then what is the worst advice you've ever been given and how did you tackle that?
I don't have an answer for this one. I guess a quality of mine is I think I'm pretty good at tuning out nonsense advice.
And is there something you wish you would have known or a skill you wish you had when starting out in the tech industry?
Knowing Python would have been really helpful.
And if you had the ability to go back in time to when you were just at the beginning of your career, what advice would you give to your younger self?
To just keep going.
And then what advice would you give to young girls, women of color, non-binary, and transgenders who want and trying to break into STEM field today, especially wanted to become next generation leaders?
You deserve a seat at the table just as much as anybody else does. And the advice is to take that seat at any opportunity that you get and don't apologize for taking that seat.
Last but not least, what is next for you in your role and career in tech? What are your career aspirations?
Right now, my team is building an AI guide that is trained on the principles of astrology and tarot. And again, while that sounds sort of insane to some, but I'm happy to hear not to you, astrology, again, is a $13 billion market, and it represents something that many people love and trust. A low-hanging criticism on this endeavor of ours comes from the misinformed opinion that such a product will not make the world a better place, and maybe even like the misinformed opinion that it could make the world a worse place. And I vehemently disagree with that stance. I think that anything that can help people find meaning in the context of a chaotic universe is 100% worthwhile. And anything that can democratize something that has been historically accessible only to the elite. And by the way, that 100% describes astrology. Historically, it's been something that, if you want it done the right way, if you want to really work with a professional, you're going to have to spend thousands of dollars. Anything that can change that is also worthwhile. So yeah, this is my loftiest aspiration right now, is to build an AI guide that uses astrology that the world loves and that's useful and that helps people improve themselves and discover what their greatest strengths are and helps them understand how to nurture and cultivate the opportunities that arise as a result of their weaknesses.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for being a guest on the Queens of Tech podcast. Sharing your journey will without a doubt inspire change and reshape company culture for the next generation of women of color, non-binary, and transgender leaders in tech. Thank you for listening. If you have worked in the tech industry minimum 3 years and would like to share your journey, please nominate yourself or somebody you know to i@jasminemoradi.com. For more podcast episodes and to learn more about the Queens of Tech initiative and to support us, visit queensof.tech.